Perfect. So let's get started. So let's first of all just talk a bit about quantitative reasoning itself. So the actual the actual section of the UCAT exam is very time restrictive. So you've got only around 40 seconds per question. So it's only 24 minutes, yet you have 36 questions to tackle. And that will involve you having around 9 scenarios normally. So that's 40 seconds per question. So it's less than 1 minute per question. It's not a lot of time. So you need to start thinking about lots and lots of strategies to have to tackle questions as quickly as possible. So just a bit of an introduction to quantitative reasoning itself. I really want to emphasize this. This is GCSE maths level. There's no A-level maths required for the quantitative reasoning section. It is very basic GCSE maths that's required. They are kind of they're going through concepts in maths in terms of mental maths. They're going through things like probability. They're going through things like graphs and understanding a bit about graphs. And also sometimes they can have some kind of basic algebraic questions as well. But again, nothing harder than GCSE level. The questions are really focused on application. So it's more about how can you apply your maths, how can you apply your mental maths to try and solve this question. So it really is that combination of mental maths and also problem solving. That's how I would summarize quantitative reasoning. And also there's lots of different topics in the quantitative reasoning section. I think that's why students find it very challenging, because there's lots of different questions that can come up. I think I've got that on the next slide. Yeah, so here it is. You can see, I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but this really give you an understanding of the types of questions. So these are kind of the topics that can come up in these quantitative reasoning, in the quantitative reasoning section. So we've got things like mean, median, mode. We've got ratios. We've got tax questions. So that's going to be involving percentages. We've got speed, distance, time, a bit of geometry, and some fractions. So this is really nice because now you can start to really understand where your strengths and weaknesses lie. So what I would recommend doing is when you are practicing questions, try your best to understand what are your strengths. Do you think you're really good at ratios, but not very good at speed, distance, time because you weren't a big fan of physics, for example? So just get into your mind what are your strengths, where do you think you need improving on as well, and then you can kind of focus on those questions in more detail. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly. So common mistakes. The most common mistake that I see students going through in the quantitative reasoning section is using the calculator, basically. The calculator is there to almost throw you off a bit. You only have 40 seconds per question, and the UCAT calculator that you get is very hard to use. I would recommend trying to use it and practice with it. So when you're doing questions, make sure you're practicing only with the UCAT calculator. Don't have your phone, don't have your A-level calculator in front of you. Don't use that at all, because you can be really quick and efficient with that. The reason why they have the calculator there in the first place is to actually trick a lot of students. They think that students will be using the calculator every single time, and that's really time consuming. So actually having the calculator there is actually a bit of a trick. So just bear that in mind. Don't try your best to not use a calculator as much as possible. Sometimes you'll have to. For example, if you're working out a certain percentage of something, sometimes that's quite difficult to do in your head. You might need to use the calculator. Again, a big mistake that students go through. This is year on year. They don't realize how important mental maths is for the quantitative reasoning section. So it's really important that you start understanding, okay, for example, what is a quarter as a decimal place? What is 1/8? What is 1/6 as a decimal place? Okay, really important stuff. So just bear that in mind. Mental maths and not using the calculator too much. The next point here is about reading everything. So when I've been speaking to a lot of students about questions that they keep on making mistakes on, those are the questions that they don't read very well. They seem to kind of skip and only read the first sentence, and then they go straight into the question, and they do all this complicated mental maths, and they write lots of things down on their whiteboard, but actually they get the wrong answer because they just didn't read it in the first place. And then finally, Another huge mistake, and again, this isn't anyone's fault. This is because when you're at school and you go through GCSE maths and you're going through A-level maths, working out and doing things step by step is the key to everything. Everything in GCSE maths revolves around doing things step by step by step by step, which is fantastic because that means you get marks for showing you're working out. In the UCAT, you don't get any marks for any form of working out because, well, they can't see any of your working out at all. It's multiple choice questions. So make sure that you don't fall into this trap of going through things step by step in that traditional GCSE maths type of route. The UCAT is all about kind of skipping these steps and going through them very, very quickly. So and again, another thing is try and identify the shortest way. So that links in with that previous comment that I made. Try and think about how can you skip these steps and try and find the shortest way possible. Try to improve your mental math skills and try to utilize similar skills from the verbal reasoning section. So look at keywords and look at key pieces of data as well. And again, the best students are the ones that if they identify a question that is way too difficult and way too long-winded, they will just skip that question and move on to the next one, because that question might end up ruining their whole quantitative reasoning section because it's so long and so complicated. So before I start, Ashir, did you have any particular questions on the Instagram? Has anyone asked anything so far?
Shivam, so there doesn't seem to be any questions so far, but if anybody has any questions, you can head off to our Instagram and there's a story where you can ask the questions on. So if you have any questions for Shivam in particular, feel free to go ahead there.
Yeah, so someone asked a bit about, do you get any working out papers? So do you have anything that you can use to work things out and jot things down? So yes, in the UCAT exam, you get given a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen, and that's what you can use to jot things down. So absolutely, I'd recommend trying to jot things down when you can. But again, be efficient and be clever with how you're using that. Don't spend every single question having to write things down again and again and again, because that will just waste a lot of time. So first of all, why do doctors need maths? Why do doctors actually need to use maths in their day-to-day world? Well, very, very quickly and briefly, we'll just discuss this. So they need to calculate things like drug doses. Again, you'll very likely need to use your calculator there, but if you need to do something quite quickly and maybe estimate the rough drug dose that a patient needs, you need to use a bit of maths there. Interpreting data. So when you're interpreting an ECG, you need to work out, what is the heart rate? How far away are the lines from each other, and rough. Again, it's a lot of estimating, and also working things out in a lot of detail. So basically what the UCAT is covering. Again, you need to take measurements of things like blood pressure. And then probably the most important part is actually analyzing data. So analyzing statistics, identifying, what is going on in this full blood count. Is the hemoglobin going up? Is the hemoglobin going down? So that's just a few reasons about why maths is quite important. Again, this might be quite relevant later on down the line for the interview. If an interviewer asks you, why do you think maths is important? There are your kind of four main reasons. So what if you don't like maths and you're really struggling with this kind of aspect of quantitative reasoning? Well, don't worry at all, because some students, for example, they hate maths. They really didn't like it, but actually they were quite efficient in their mental maths. So yes, they didn't score too highly in their A-level maths. Maybe they didn't score very highly on their GCSE maths, but again, they can come out and score 800 in the UCAT in the quantitative reasoning section. But someone else who might score 100% in their maths A-level, maths GCSE, they go through things very, very systematically, go through things step by step by step. Actually, in the UCAT, that's not what it's all about. It's about going through things and actually skipping these steps. So I want to emphasize this a lot, because anyone really struggling with quantitative reasoning, anyone struggling with maths in general, please don't worry, because this is actually an opportunity for you to kind of set yourself apart and give yourself an opportunity to do well in the quantitative reasoning section. So how hard are the questions? Now, again, how long is a piece of string? They really do vary from quite easy questions where you can just inspect. So inspection just means having a look at the question and you can kind of eyeball and realize, okay, this is going to be the right answer. And you can do that in around 20 seconds, 15 seconds sometimes. But these are the questions that are going to be the challenging ones. These hard questions with lots of steps, lots of calculation steps, lots of time traps. So the time traps generally are actually the traps that are getting you to use the calculator, and they're quite long-winded. So again, we'll go through a question, a very hard question, a bit later on today to just show you and give you an understanding of what it's all like. So we're going to start off with estimating. So we're going to try and go through estimating in the UCAT. We're going to go through a bit on eyeballing, and then we're going to go through overestimating versus underestimating. But again, the whole point of today, what I really want you guys to take out from today is about how do you estimate in the UCAT exam? What does estimating mean, and what's the difference between estimating and precision? So estimation versus precision. Ashir, do you just actually want to tell me a bit, what is your understanding of what is estimation and what is precision? What's the key difference between these two things?
Right, so good question, Shivam, thanks. So estimation is where you would actually round up numbers up and down, especially when your answer choices are quite widespread out. Say, for example, you get a question about multiplication and you've got 9.9 times 11.1. Instead of doing the exact calculation, if your answers are 70, 80, 90, and 100, you can just round it to 9 and 10. Then you can do 10 times 9, and you can put the answer of 90, which is a lot easier than putting another choice. Something along the lines of that. It really depends on the question when you should estimate. Where you've got answers where you have to be precise on, those are usually where the answers are quite close to each other. They're looking for a very specific value, and that's where you want to use a calculator. In fact, somebody has actually asked a question on our Instagram about this too. So somebody asked, when should we use the UCAT calculator and how can we use it when practicing too? So Shivam, do you know where we can find the UCAT calculator on the official UCAT website?
Yeah, of course. So all you have to do, Ashir, here is just go onto the UCAT website. So you just type in ucat.co.uk or ucat.com, and you just go to the part to the UCAT section, and you'll actually find a practice UCAT calculator. So you can actually just use the calculator, and it will just be an online calculator that you can use. You can't actually type in numbers on the calculator. You actually have to physically kind of click it with your mouse. So again, that's why it's so time consuming. But again, really, that kind of summarizes what you're saying in terms of estimation versus precision. When numbers are very, very, very close to one another, that's where we have to start using precision, and we might need to use the calculator. But otherwise, estimating is the way forward. I've got another question, Ashir, from the Instagram, which is how can you improve mental maths? So that's a fantastic question. What I would recommend doing is actually going back to really basic, even before GCSE, your times tables. So go through your times tables, just make sure that you know everything from kind of 1 times 1 all the way to 12 times 12. And just go through multiplication, go through, again, fractions. So make sure that you understand kind of what is 1/6 as a decimal place, what is 1/8, what is 1/7. And that will really, really help you in terms of mental maths. Perfect. So I'm just going to go on to the next slide now. And we're going to, again, we've covered kind of what the difference is between estimating and precision. So let's go through an example here. So we've got a question here. So have we got the quiz set up here, Ashir?
Yes, we have, which I'm just going to start now.
Perfect.
So if everybody just looks up for the poll on Zoom. So I've just launched that.
Amazing. So we'll give you a good amount of time. We'll give you about a minute and a half just to go through this question. Just take it slowly if need be.
So typically you would get 40 seconds on a question like this, right, Shivam?
Exactly.
So a question like this is where you can actually estimate. For example, this is a very good example of one, which we'll explain later.
Perfect. So we'll just give another about 10, 20 seconds. So yeah, I just want to clarify something. I'm getting a few messages just about the the calculator itself. So you will have access to the calculator throughout the entire UCAT exam. And that calculator just sits in the top corner, and you just click on it and then you'll access the calculator. Again, the best way to understand how the calculator is used is to go onto the official UCAT website and just start practicing a few of those mock papers that they have there, because that will give you the opportunity to use the calculator. So perfect. We've got nearly 90% of everyone who's voted here, which is fantastic. And it seems B seems to be the kind of answer that a majority of people are going for. So let's go through this then. So what you could have done is use the calculator and just simply done £580 and 72p divided by 122, and you would have got the answer. But if you don't have a lot of time, and if you want to answer this question very, very quickly and efficiently, what you could have done is actually just rounded this up to 600 and rounded this down to about 120. So 600 divided by 120 off the top of my head is 5. So I know here that this B is the closest number to 5 here out of all the answer options. So actually, that's what I would have gone for straight away. So actually, within 10, even 15 seconds, we've got the answer to this question. So rather than kind of faffing around with the calculator and being exact and actually get 4.76 or 4.75, if you use the calculator, we've estimated. Okay, so estimating really is the way forward in the UCAT exam, trying to estimate as much as possible. So I just want to clarify that one more time. So we've got 580 and we've got 122. You could have used the calculator, but if you wanted to be even more efficient, you could have just done 600 divided by 120, and that would have given you 5. Yeah, that takes around 10, 15 seconds. Perfect. So when do we estimate? A question I get asked all the time. Estimating is really important, but when do we actually need to use it? So we'll just clarify this one more time. So estimating is all about really rounding figures and making them really easy to use. So if we've got 995, we can round that up to 1,000. We can round things up to make things easier for us, and it will help us improve our mental maths and make it easier for us. This is something that I tend to find with a lot of students. They try and overcomplicate things all the time. They try and find the kind of more difficult path and difficult route. Do you think the key to quantitative reasoning is actually to simplify everything and make it easy for yourself?
Definitely. I think in school we're taught to show every single step that we take and to show clear working out, whereas in the UCAT you want to do the exact opposite. So you want to make sure you take as many shortcuts as possible. And Shivam, knowing you and I having done quantitative reasoning quite a few years ago, you know that actually we're used to doing very long steps for maths. When we go into QR, that doesn't work in 40 seconds. There is absolutely no way. So you have to make sure that you skip steps where they're absolutely unnecessary, but at the same time, you're making sure that you're getting the correct answer as well.
I think the biggest thing here, Ashir, is that a lot of students get scared. They get scared of estimating, and that's absolutely fine. When Ashir and I actually started revising for our UCAT exam, we were exactly the same. So we found it very, very challenging actually to estimate answers, because we wanted to be exact. We wanted, we're so used to GCSE maths, we're so used to kind of A-level maths where we have to be exactly right. We need the exact answer. The UCAT is slightly different. You can use a bit of estimating. You can use a bit of kind of guesstimating, is what we kind of refer to sometimes, and that's really important. So again, a question like this: what's the approximate price? I haven't even got the question here. I've only got the answers. Do you think that we could use estimating, or do you think we need to be quite precise? Well, that's quite obvious, isn't it? The answers here are quite spread apart. So actually, because they're spread so far apart, this should really be a trigger to us to actually use a bit of estimating. And another big trigger word, and this is something I really want everyone to write down on a piece of paper, or just kind of really get this into your mind. Some of the questions in the UCAT exam say things like approximate the answer or estimate the answer. These should really be alarm bells should be ringing in your head, and that should really give you the opportunity to understand that you don't have to be very, very precise with this question. You can do a bit of estimating. You can kind of round numbers up, round numbers down, and use a bit of mental maths to help you. And again, sometimes if a question is very, very long-winded, it's quite difficult. you don't need to use that calculator. You can go straight into estimating, start rounding things up. Okay. So I think the big thing from today, and this is something I really want everyone to take away from today, is don't be scared of estimating. You don't have to be exact every single time, because actually the answers will actually reflect that. They, for example, again, we'll go to the next question here actually, if I can get it up. This is a perfect example. So what's the exact value of the drink? We've only got 1p separating every single answer. So of course, there's no way that you can do any form of estimating on a question like this. You need to be exact. So just to clarify, when the answer options are very, very close together, that's when you have to be a bit more precise. You might need to then definitely use the calculator for something. Again, trigger words are things like exact or precise. Perfect. So I'm just going to go through a few questions that people have. Some of the questions that have come up are, is there a timer for each question? So no, there isn't a timer exactly for each question. So for example, when you go on to the next question, it's not going to say you have 40 seconds. There will just be a timer for the entire section. So Ashir, what is a good way to reflect on that? And how do you think we should be really efficient with our time? How should we shouldn't be looking at the time every second, should we? But what can we do to help us?
So first of all is you want to make sure that you're not spending exactly 40 seconds on each question. Some will take longer, some will take less time. That's the general amount you should be taking on each statistically, because 36 questions, 24 minutes. However, in terms of doing a question, you've got to first of all see what type of question is it? Is it one with a lot of data? Is it something where I can easily estimate, such as the one we've shown you? Those are the ones that you want to spend less time on, whereas the ones with lots of data, longer questions, the multi-step ones, you can take longer on. A general rule is if you are stuck in a question you don't get, that is when you should flag, because one of the other questions we actually had is, what is the actual function of the flagging questions on the UCAT? Well, it's actually so that when you get to the review screen, when you finish the section, you can go back to the ones that you found difficult. That helps save time instead of you sitting there and being stuck on a question and spending absolutely ages. It's like a domino effect, isn't it, Shivam? So if you spend long on one question, you actually get rid of time that you could spend later on easier questions. Sometimes what they do is even put the easier questions later on in the exam, and you end up wasting so much time that when you get to the easier questions, you just don't have enough time to do them, and you lose more marks, which are essentially, I like to say, free marks, because they're a lot easier.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point there. Another question that came up on the Instagram is, how many hard questions to easy questions are there? And again, that's really, really difficult to say, but generally it's roughly around the 50-50. So for every hard question you get, there might be a slightly easier question. You get a hard question, you might get an easier question, but it's not going to be like that, hard then easy, hard then easy. There might be 5 hard questions in a row and then 5 easy questions in a row, for example. So that's where students, again, get really flustered in the quantitative reasoning section, because they've got 5 very challenging questions that they've had, and then that's it. They really lose focus, because they just mentally they say to themselves, I can't do it because this section is too difficult for me. When actually this is where you have to just show that bit of perseverance and continue. A few people asked about, can you go back to the last few questions? The reason why I didn't spend too much time on it was actually they weren't questions. They were just I just wanted to show the answers here. That's why. And just really emphasize that sometimes you need to estimate and sometimes you have to be very, very, very precise. So let's talk a bit about eyeballing the graphs. So what does eyeballing mean? So let's go to this question. So Shir, if you get that poll up so everyone can have a go at answering this.
Yep. So should we give them about a minute for this one as well, Shivam?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Great. So I'm just going to launch the poll now. So if you guys get ready, and there we go. There are some that are coming in literally seconds afterwards. This is we seem to already have quite a few pros on this, don't we, Shivam?
Yeah, perfect. Ashir, do you want to tell me a bit about graphs in terms of the graphs come up frequently in the quantitative reasoning section? How do you go about actually tackling graph questions?
So graphs are actually quite common. definitely do get them time to time. And I can't guarantee you will get them this year, but how you go about doing graphs is if you have one like this, where it's asking you about the difference in population between two bars, shall we say, you actually have to really quickly look at it. You can't spend absolutely ages using your fingers to kind of get the exact value. Again, estimation is probably the best way of answering this one. So you need to use your cursor very quickly just to go to the nearest 100 and just get the value there. Another thing is sometimes they ask you for the means of values. And we do have a question, I think, on these slides. I'm not 100% sure, but if you were asked to work out a mean from a graph, you actually have to, some people think get every single value and then add them together on the calculator and then divide it by the total number of bars. Well, you can actually just draw a line of best fit between all of the bars and see which one is the mean. And over here, Shivam's doing exactly that. And it's around 400 to 500. So you could put something like 500. And if there's an answer choice that's 500, you'd probably go with that.
Actually, to be honest, I'm just going to reiterate exactly what you just said. I want everyone to really be aware of this because it's huge. It's a really, really important point that you mentioned. I have sat with students, Ashir, and I've asked them to work out the mean of, for example, this a question like this. So what's the incarceration rates? Can you tell me the mean for this question? That's what I would ask a student. And they would add everything up and then divide by 6. And it's just sometimes we're just pre-programmed to do that. It's so natural, and that's fine. That's fine if you thought of that to begin with. But actually, this is a really important tip that Ashir's just given us. And that is actually if we draw a line of best fit here, like I'm just doing here, that is actually giving us an understanding of where the mean lies, because we can see that everything's going down quite in an orderly manner. So we can draw a nice kind of line of best fit around here, and that will give us a rough mean of the incarceration rates. So to answer this question, we've got, again, I'll just quickly read it. So what is the difference between Russia compared to Japan? So again, with Russia, it's roughly around 400. With Japan, I'd say roughly around 200. Okay, it's not exactly 200, but it's roughly around there. So hopefully everyone did put, just get to the, yeah. So again, we need to estimate here. There's no point being exact and kind of working, is it 180, is it 175? It's just simple, 400, take away 200. But actually, the reason why we put this question in, guys, is not to actually answer this question. It was actually to make this big point about working out the mean and just giving you that basic understanding, because you're going to come across very, very challenging questions that you need to answer very, very quickly. And actually understanding this concept of where the mean lies is quite important. So what I would say is don't estimate blindly. So in the previous example, if the options were a lot closer together or they gave us particular numbers, then be very, very wary. I just want everyone to understand that estimating is something that you shouldn't be scared of. And I want everyone to have it in the back of their mind. But again, don't assume that you need to estimate every single question on the UCAT exam. Estimating should be near your forefront. You should be using it as quickly as possible. But again, not for every single question. That's where we have to start being a bit kind of cynical in that sense. So let's go for another example here. So Shia, if you just get the poll up, and again, I'm just going to check the Instagram to see if there's any other questions as well, okay?
So this one, I think we'll give them slightly longer because some of them might do the standard trip that's given in this. So I'll launch the poll now. There are a few questions, Shivan, that have come through, and I thought one of them was quite interesting. Is it better to guess the questions if you're stuck with time, or just run out of time on them and not bother doing them? What do you think about that one?
Oh, you have to guess. You have to guess them. There's no point skipping questions. I think, to be honest, if I was to make a list of what is the most criminal error to make in the UCAT exam, I think that would be my number one, is not putting an answer down. You can't, these are multiple choice questions. You can't leave anything blank. So even if you flag a question, so if anyone flags a question in the UCAT exam, always put an answer down. That's a really, really big tip. And again, just write it down if need be. If you ever get a question that you need to flag, ensure that you have guessed an answer anyway, because sometimes you won't have enough time to go back to those flagged questions and you might have just left it blank.
Yeah, and I think you also have that chance of getting it right. If you don't attempt the question, then you never get the mark. And somebody else has also asked a question: are hard questions worth more points? They're all worth 1 point each, the easy and the hard questions. So sometimes if you've got a super hard question in front of you, it might be worth just skipping that one and moving on to the easier questions, which some people do, just flag the question and move on. That way you get the easier marks and you're only skipping the ones that you would have not got anyways.
Perfect. So majority of people, this seems a bit more of well, it is a more challenging question.
Yeah.
It's a combination of, do we use a bit of estimating? Do we need to be precise? Can we use our calculator? Lots of things here. And some people might be using their calculator on this question, which is absolutely fine. It's just about really understanding, when you start using the calculator, things do take a bit more time. So we'll just wait till around 75% of people have answered, and then I'll start going through this question.
Another questions that has come through on the Instagram is quite an interesting one. Is the one about what sections come first on the UCAT, and can we go back on them? So Shivam, we can only go through questions or each section one at a time. You have a time limit on them. Now you can go back on questions on each section, right? But you can't go back onto the previous section. So you finish verbal reasoning and moved on to quantitative reasoning. You can't go back.
Exactly. Yeah. So you finish verbal reasoning, you finish the first section, that's it. You forget about it, you move on to the next one, and you try and score as highly on that as possible. Again, this comes down to experience here, because a lot of students first starting out, they might have a terrible experience with verbal reasoning. They really didn't enjoy it. And that actually causes them to be flustered for the rest of the UCAT exam. So it's a really important point that we're mentioning here. So even if you have a bad section, don't worry, every section is independent from one another. And you can make up for a poor section with another section. For example, it can be quantitative reasoning that you score a bit highly on. Or maybe if you didn't do too well on the quantitative reasoning section, you move on to the next one and you try and score as highly as possible. So let's go through this question this year. So what is the difference between the total number of automotives and the total number of all other robots across all countries? So again, here quite an important point here is all, isn't it? So we need to make sure that we're looking at all the countries here, not just a few. So Bashir, what would you do to work out a rough mean of the automotive cars here?
A good question there, Shivam. So just like we previously mentioned, when working out a mean on particularly a bar chart over here, it'd be best to just draw a line. Now, as we can see, the 1000 benchmark around there seems to be where there's a line that you can draw that most of the bars are closest to. And similarly for the red bars, we have 200. So if we draw a line with 200 and 1000, we work out the difference, that's 800. We actually see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 countries shown over here. So we have about 8 times 800. And that total comes out to roughly around 6,400. So the closest number to that is 7,530. We know this is slightly an underestimation because the red ones are quite a lot of them are below 200. But because of that one large Republic of Korea, the line that I drew was at 200. So the real answer is going to be slightly above. So the best estimation over here would be B. Now we can estimate here because the answers are very spread out, as previously shown. We can also eliminate A. So in the case that you are stuck, you know that the total of all countries can never be 850 because there are so many different countries.
So exactly. So Shir, to make that point there, so even if you just looked at Japan and you saw 1,400 and you saw 200, so 1,400 minus 200 is 1,200. So we know guaranteed 100% that our answer is going to be more than 1,200. So again, fantastic, because within 5 seconds of Shir, or 10 seconds, we have eliminated A. So if for example, Ashir, this was the last question on our UCAT section, and we only had 17 seconds left, what we could have done here, or it could have been 10 seconds or 15 seconds. What we could have done here straight away is just seen Japan and done 1,400, take away 200. Okay, it's 1,200. It's going to be more than that. We can get rid of A, and now we can guess any of these answers here, can't we? Okay, and we could have guessed that. Or what some people might do, for example, very, very quickly is, okay, they've got, if Japan was around 1,200, maybe we can do 1,200 times by 8, and maybe work out, maybe it's around 8,000 or so. So maybe we could have guessed B, C, or maybe D, and maybe E would be a bit unrealistic. It's a bit high. So I'm going to go through this, guys, one more time because some people might be a bit confused with a question like this. I'm just going to go through it step by step now. So just to clarify, it would take a long time to do 1,400 plus 1,150 plus 1,150 plus 1,150 plus 1,000, etc., and then divide it by the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 countries that we have here to get our kind of mean. To get our our mean total of automotives here. So again, look at the answers and think about estimating. So this was something that I just mentioned to everyone just now. If you only had a few seconds to answer this question, what I would have done is just looked at one of these randomly. So for example, I could have taken, let's say, USA. I could have done around 1,150 take away, I don't know, maybe 100, and I've got roughly around 1,000. So what we seem to see here, Ashir, is that for any country, it's roughly the difference between the robots and the automotives are around 1,000. Is that fair enough? Yeah. And then there are 8 countries, so 8 times 1,000 is 8,000. So actually, estimating is huge on this question because it can give us a ballpark figure. So we know that roughly it's actually probably going to be between B or C, isn't it, really? So if we didn't have a lot of time, again, we could have guessed and we would have got a 50-50 chance of getting that correct. So just like Ashir said, we put a line of best fit here, and roughly every single country has around 1,000 automotives. That's our estimate. And each country roughly, again, you don't need to be exact, but it's roughly around 150, maybe, Ashir said 200. I actually disagreed with Ashir, and I thought it might be a bit lower because if you can see France, Italy, Slovakia, Spain, they're really, really low. And actually this Republic of Korea is really skewing all the figures here. But again, Ashir was absolutely right. It's going to be somewhere between 150 or 200 roughly. So what do? Well, we do 1,000, take away 150 to get around 850 or to get around 800. And like Ashir said, there's 8 different countries. So 800 times 8 is a lot easier to do than probably 850 times 8. But we get a figure of around 6,800. Okay. There's no, then we need to start checking our answers and seeing which answer here is closest to 6,800. And that is 7,530. So a question like this, Ashir, do you think, what do you think? Go through this step by step. How would you tackle this question step by step? Just one more time for anyone who's a bit confused. What is the way to go about this? The long-winded method versus the short, efficient method.
So the short, efficient method would be the best one if you're looking to save time, which is obviously the main goal here. So I think first thing to do is if you see something like this where you see the total number of all other robots across all countries, that is obviously asking for a lot of steps there to work out the difference of each one, add them up together, then dividing by the total. As we can see, people had spent a lot of time to get above 80% of people answering that on the poll. Well, it took about 3 minutes. And if we took 3 minutes, that's about 5 or 6 questions easily on there. Now, one of the things I have to mention is that people are asking, would this be classed as a hard question? We're getting a lot of questions about hard and easy questions. It's very subjective. Some people will find this very easy because they know about this method beforehand. Some people will find this very hard. The idea with QR is, again, they're looking for people not necessarily really good at maths. They're looking for people who can find the shortcuts and the easy methods. And again,
Exactly. So there, Ashir, what you just said there is basically anyone who found this question quite challenging and quite difficult. Now, actually, this seems like quite an easy question, and they would now classify this type of question into like the easier types of questions, wouldn't they? But
yep.
before, majority of people who started this question, they might have found this quite challenging, and it might be put into the other bracket of a harder or very difficult question.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect example that we have here, Ashir, that the more practice you do, the more understanding of these tips and tricks, the easier it will actually be, because most of the questions now are changing from the kind of difficult or very challenging to the kind of easier questions.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So let's move on to the next one. So again, sorry about the writing there. It's a bit muddled, but if a big timing tip in the UCAT exam is that if you need to calculate over 20 sums, then there's likely to be a shortcut, you know. So if you need to calculate, I'd say, Ashir, more than 10 sums, there's surely a shortcut somewhere, isn't there? There's surely some way to make things more efficient for yourself.
If we look at it from the examiner's point of view, they're trying to make questions that either slip you up and make you make mistake, for example, unit conversions, which we'll be talking about in later webinars. But with a UCAT examiner, they're trying to make a question seem long when it actually isn't, and you can take a shortcut. That's the whole purpose of it. So if there is a question where it seems like there's lots of steps, you can cut some out. And again, over 10 sums, I'd say, like you said, Shivam, that is a clear question that you need to spend a lot less time on.
Fantastic. And again, another big thing with averages is that when you calculate averages and extrapolate them to totals, estimates become larger, and there's a bigger margin of error. So what does this actually mean, Ashir? What are we trying to get across here with averages?
So with averages, when you're actually working them out over there, we actually worked out the average was 1,150. Now, because the estimation we did, we saw that I got 6,400, you got 6,800, we multiplied by 8. Now, if you go with a minor difference, say if someone went with 175, they would have got quite a different a midway answer there. So you have to be quite careful with your average. If you go with a slightly different average, you will extrapolate data, or you'll get answers that are widely different to the actual answer. So you have to make sure. So for example, someone over there, if they went for 1,100 and a difference of 100 there, you'd get 1,000, and 1,000 times by 8 is 8,000, where someone might start to think, maybe I should go for option C.
Exactly. So again, perfect example there. If for example, Ashir, like you said, you looked at Japan first, and then you worked that out, and it was roughly 1,200, and then you did 1,200 times by 8, actually your answer is closer to C rather than B. So a lot of people here, again, think about what are the examiners actually trying to do here? Where are they trying to trick you? And the trick here is that actually they want you to put C. That is basically the trick to this question. They want you to put C because they want you to see Japan and then times that number by 8 and then get to that answer. So again, you can kind of put yourself in the examiner's shoes. That's what I really like to do, Ashir, is try and think, if I was an examiner, obviously I'm not going to make things blatantly obvious and easy for the students. I want to kind of put in a little trick. So if you can identify that trick, you're halfway there.
Yeah. I think one of the key things that we were just going to talk about is over and underestimation. Sometimes you have to be quite proactive with understanding, am I overestimating or underestimating there? We know over there that we underestimated because, for example, I went with the value 200, Shivam went closer with 150. My difference was smaller, and thus I got a smaller amount. So you have to make sure and understand what is the difference between these two. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this one, as it's very important because it can change your answer choice quite significantly if you don't know if you're underestimating or overestimating.
Perfect. Again, some people might not really understand a bit about what over or underestimating is. So to give you a very simplified kind of version of this, if the answer to a question is 100, and I worked out that it was 120, that is going to be an overestimate. I have overestimated the answer, and I've got 120 rather than 100. Now, if Ashir, for example, got 75 as his answer, that's going to be an underestimate. He has underestimated his answer, and he's got 75, when actually in reality, the answer was 100. So this is really important and actually takes a bit of practice and time to actually work out what is going on in terms of over and underestimating. So I have chosen quite a complicated topic here, haven't I, Shir? So don't worry if you can't grasp everything straight away. But the whole idea, the reason why I chose this is actually because I want to give everyone a foundation. I want everyone to give an understanding of what over and underestimating is so that you can really move forward from this and try more difficult questions. So a question like this, Ashir. So should you estimate or work precisely? What do you think on a question like this?
Again, we can see the values are very close to the nearest 10. So 9.8 is very close to 10, 11.1 is very close to 10, and 19.7 is very close to 20. So you can round these up. Well, I'd say with the QR questions where you're thinking, should I estimate or work precisely? There's a few hints. We saw previously where it said, what is the exact value? If you see something like that, then that's your prompt to think, right, I need to find the exact value and use a calculator. Whereas over here, you can see the answers are quite spread out. They have a difference at least of 1,000 or even hundreds. And you can even eliminate some straight away that you can see 8,181. If you're slightly good at mental maths, you will realize that's quite a high value. One easy step to take here is, how much should you estimate? Should you estimate 9.8 to 10? Should you estimate 19.7 to 19 or 20? Which one's easier? 11.1 to 10 or 11? At the end of the day, whatever is easier for you. So for example, me, I can round this up to 10 and 11 and 20. And if I do 10 times 20, that's 200. 200 times 11 comes out to roughly 2,200. But then we think, where do we go with the answer there? Would it be answer B or C? And Shivam, what do you think would be the answer there?
Okay, so you have just done 10
Yep.
times 11
Yep.
times 20. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And you've got 2,200.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to now look at each number closely. So 9.8. So what you've done is actually rounded upwards.
Yes.
With 11.1, you've rounded down.
Yep.
And with 19.7, you've rounded upwards. So actually, 2 out of these you've rounded upwards, and only 1 of them you've rounded down. So what I'm thinking is actually the answer that you've got is slightly over what the real answer is. Okay, so it's not actually going to be hugely over. It's actually going to be quite close. It's going to be quite close to 2,200, but actually 2,200 is going to be an overestimate of what the answer is. So actually, what I would go for here is C. So 2,143, because that's quite close to 2,200, but actually it's lower. It's an underestimate of 2,200.
Yeah. If we change that value of 11.1 to 10, then you would get 2,000 as opposed to 2,200. And that's when people will start thinking, maybe it's answer B. But however, we've actually underestimated more this time because we've changed 11.1 to 10, which is, if we look at it carefully, a much more of an underestimate. Because we changed that by 1.1, whereas the other ones we changed by 0.2 and 0.3 up. 9.8 goes to 10 and 19.7 goes to 20. So, you have to make sure and realize, am I actually underestimating the value or overestimating? Because it can change your answer. And here you're right, Shivam, it's just slightly above 2,143, not significantly above, which is why you can go with answer C. And, there is an element of fear. Everybody worries about doing this, especially since you're in year 12 and majority of you will be worried about, will I get into medical school or not? And if you just get rid of that fear momentarily and just think about, if I answer this right, that's it, then you probably will get a lot more marks in the time that's required.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic question, but actually really emphasizes that. So what everyone could have done is actually just plugged in 9.8 times by 11.1 times by 19.7 into the calculator. Do you know what could have happened? And what would have actually happened with me here, Ashir, is I would have probably typed one of the wrong answers. I would then have to clear my calculator. I'd have to start again. Using that calculator is a bit of a faff. And actually, Ashir, this would really be classified as quite an easy question in the UCAT. But actually, this is the type of question where there would be maybe 2 sentences after this, wouldn't there? So there might be, work out the volume of, I don't know, all the cubes in the room. And actually, this could have only been one of the 3 cubes that were there, for example. So that's more of a realistic UCAT question. That would be a bit more challenging than this one. So in that type of question, you would definitely have to use estimating because there's a lot going on. We need to start adding things up together. So I think the big thing from today really is actually about not being scared about estimating. And actually, if you want to estimate, you need to understand what over and underestimating is. Because if you didn't understand what over or underestimating is for this type of question this year, it could have gone a bit pear-shaped, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm. And one important thing to remember as well is when we're dividing values, it flips the other way around. So if I make the difference higher between two values, say if I'm dividing 8 by 2, and I change the 2 to 2.5, my actual answer will come out less. So if you increase the values in division, or increase the difference between two values in division, you're actually underestimating. In multiplication, you're actually overestimating because you're increasing the values. So it's important to kind of distinguish that, and that's that will get much more tricky later on, which is why we say mental maths is very important. The difference between a high performer in the UCAT and a low performer is someone will have practiced questions like this enough, build the confidence to be able to do them. And again, the fear of being rejected from medical school at this point is obviously quite high. And a lot of students will be worried, if I don't do well on the UCAT, then I'm not going to get to medical school. But I'm going to medical school, I'll have to take a gap year, I'll have to do this. Well, if you momentarily just concentrate on the QR and at that moment think about how do I get the maximum marks on here, it usually works a lot better. So I think there's an element of kind of mentally training yourself for the UCAT as well. You have to take things at a step at a time. That's one thing I'm assuming a lot of students over here would be worried about at this point.
And again, Ashir, we're giving advice that probably no one would ever give to students in terms of like teachers wouldn't be going through this with you. No one is ever going to tell you about the mental aspect of the UCAT exam. And this is something which is quite important to actually Ashir and I, because actually we speak to lots of students and students do get worried about the UCAT exam. And the whole idea of us and why we're helping you guys is to actually get rid of that fear and to actually give you these tips and tricks. So actually that you become fearless. You're taking an exam and you're absolutely fearless, and actually you're mentally prepared and mentally in the game for an exam like this. Okay, so just want to clarify with this question this year one more time. With estimating, we like you did 10 times 11 times 20 would have got 2,200. So really, it's between kind of these two answers. Like you said, this is a very slight overestimate. So that's why we chose 2,100. Okay. Yes, 1,950 is, again, it is lower than 2,200, isn't it, Ashir? Yeah. But why did we choose C over B then?
Because we didn't change the values by much. However, if we changed it quite a lot, then you would probably think it's B. But like you said, Shivam, it's important to look at the values individually and quite closely. In fact, how much we've changed it by. It was 0.2, by 0.3, and by 0.1. So it's not much. That's your hint to kind of say, the value is going to be slightly lower, not a lot lower. So you have to kind of look at each value specifically. And, with enough practice, you will probably get confident enough to just put C without even thinking about it.
Yeah, perfect. So again, we're just going to clarify this. So overestimating, this is what Ashir was making in terms of dividing, a really important aspect here. So if you're going to divide 80 by 8.4, but instead you did 80 divided by 8, your value is going to be an overestimate. So again, just really break this down and think about it in your head. If I did 80 divided by 8.4, the answer that I'm going to get, Ashir, is it going to be lower or higher than 10? So 80 divided by 8 is 10, isn't it? So is 80 divided by 8.4, is it going to be higher than 10 or lower than 10?
It's going to be lower. So if we go to 10, for example, 80 divided by 10 instead of 8.4 to make things easier, it's actually going to be 8. The answer, 80 divided by 10. However, with 80 divided by 8, it's going to be 10. So you've got higher answers. That's what I was talking about. If you make the difference between the two numbers lower, then you're going to have a lower answer, vice versa. And in terms of underestimation, again, if you lower the values in multiplication, like is shown over here, you do 41.25 times by 82.3, and you change that to 40 times 80, you actually get a lower value. So in division is it's often quite useful to really think about what you're actually doing here. In simple maths, if you increase a value, especially the lower end of the value, which is the 8 and the 8.4, then your overall answer is going to be a lot lower if you increase it more and more.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's a really important point. If anyone's struggling to understand what over and underestimating is, just pick a different number. So like Ashir did, he didn't use 8.4. He chose something a lot higher than 8. He chose 10, for example. So just do that. If you're struggling with understanding over and underestimating, give yourself an opportunity to understand it and maybe just use some kind of use a different answer, for example, and try and work it out. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do here, Ashir, is move on to our final question of today. It's the last question. I want everyone to have a go at this. So Ashir, if you don't mind just getting the poll up for this question so everyone can have a go.
So I've started the poll on that one.
Perfect.
I think this is one that would be classified as a difficult question that people are asking about. But then when we actually do it, then people will change their minds on that.
Absolutely. So we're going to be quiet now. Have a go at this question. Don't worry too much about time. Just think about what are the kind of tips and tricks that you can go through with this question. Okay, so Ashir, we've had around 2 minutes or so here, and it's literally 75% of people have voted. So let's go through this actually. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Ashir, actually. What is the first step out of all the steps that we're going to do on this question? What's the first thing you want to do on this question?
Well, first of all, let's read the question first, because there is too much data there to read straight away. If you think about the time that you have, we don't have enough time to read the information. Most likely, chances are, if you read the question first, you're not going to absorb it straight away. So move straight to the question.
Okay, perfect. So Ashir, I've just read the question here, and I understand that the table contains information from a sample of Russian and English readers about how far they managed to get through classic works of Russian literature, either in the original Russian or in English translation. You may assume that Russian and English readers average the same percentage completion of each book.
Yep.
Okay. So I've read the question. Now, Ashir, what's the next step? And probably the most important part of this question in terms of, and again, I'll give you a clue, it's to do with the answers here.
So one of the most important steps next is actually look at what do we need to find the answer? Well, we need the smallest difference in the number of words. We also need the smallest percentage completion, because if you think about it logically, if you have the smallest percentage of completion, you have less words. And the less difference in words that you have, then there'll be the less total difference between Russian and English. So then actually, Shivam, what we do is, if you look at the differences, it's quite hard to work out the exact values. And this is where the examiner is thinking, if I put in very complicated numbers such as what they have, and actually even most of the digits are all different, and there's 6 figures, 5 figures mostly, you don't have to work out the exact difference. What I tend to say to students is just really quickly, this is where you can estimate very easily. If you look at the percentage completion as well, 11.9, 29.1, you can round these up to the nearest whole number very easily. So one of the easiest thing to do is we'll first focus on the differences. So I'm not going to focus on the last 3 digits of each number. So 75,617 is just going to become 75 for me. And again, same for the English one, for A Hero of Our Time is going to be 68 instead of 68,688. The difference there I'm going to say is 7. Difference on the next one I'm going to say is 37. Difference on the next one is 4, 8, 6, and 28, 10, and 8 going down. Now, if I look,
I'm just going to stop you there actually, because what we've done here, and to be honest, I wanted you to do this exactly because this was the first step that I was trying to actually kind of get across to everyone here. Is actually, Ashir, you've looked at the question, haven't we? And we've read the question and we actually understand it quite well. This is actually a really nice opportunity now to actually just have a quick glance at the answers here that we have. And actually, if we have a look at the answers here, so we've got these 5. Why is that so important, Ashir? What is the point that I'm trying to make here?
There's some you can eliminate without
perfect.
Without actually even looking at too much of the data. For example, the ones with massive differences, you can actually take out right away. So that was a really good point you picked up on, Shiva, and I missed out. The and Margarita one, for example, and you've got some in there that have got differences of 20, 30,000, and you can just look at them and say, they're not going to be the answer. For example, A Hero of Our Time here, that's got a small difference of 7,000 relatively. Whereas, for example, War and Peace, if you look at the difference there, that's massive with 28,000. So you can just eliminate C. The less choices you have, the less you have to choose between, and that just makes it quicker for you to choose an option.
So actually, Ashir, this is a really big point that I wanted to make right at the beginning. Actually, is that, do you know what? I didn't want you to even speak of the word crime and punishment at all. And the reason for that is because crime and punishment is not in my answers. So I know that, you know what? I'm going to get rid of crime and punishment. I never want to see it again. I'm going to ignore it for the entirety of this question. The exact same applies to Lolita. I never want to see it. I never want to hear about it. I don't even want to touch the question at all. Okay. And what is the other one? If I quickly scan it, it's this one, isn't it? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. I just want to get rid of them. I don't even want to work out the I don't even want to work out an estimate. I don't want to do anything with it at all because it's not in my answer. So again, this is a really big point that I want to stress to everyone, is that yes, read the question properly, but also really focus on the answers, because that is going to help you. What a lot of students might do here, Ashir, is actually try and work out the estimate for crime and punishment. But actually, that is the biggest waste of time ever for a question like this, because it's not even going to be an answer. Yeah. So we've read the question, we've glanced at the answer, we've now eliminated 3 of the kind of parts of our table. And now we've done exactly what you just said here. And I'm going to move on to the next slide so that we can actually write down on the screen exactly what we need to do. So this is exactly what Ashir's done. He has worked out the difference between Russian and English. It's 7,000 for this one. It's around 4,000, 8,000, 10,000, and 28,000 roughly. Okay. So Ashir, you've done that. You've worked out the rough difference. Can you just tell me, and Ashir, again, some people might not really understand this. What's the purpose of the average percentage completion across all readers? Why is that significant? And why did you say you wanted to pick something that was the lowest possible? Why did you want to pick the lowest percentage?
Because if we have a lower amount of completion of a book, then we're going to have less words. Technically speaking, if you really think about it here, we're trying to find the smallest difference in the words read, both in Russian and in English. If a book has been less completed, then we're going to have less words naturally.
Yeah, from we're naturally just working with less numbers. So for example, Ashir, if someone read 100% of a book, that's so many more words that we're now playing with, and that is just going to increase the number of words. It's the difference between the two is going to significantly be increased. So that is why, again, I really want to clarify this, because some people really struggle with this concept for this question, is that the average percentage completion, you want to pick the smallest percentage. And the reason for that is because you're trying to limit the number of words that we have here, that we're trying to get the differences between.
Mhm.
So tell me, Venashir, what are we going to do next? So what ones, just by eyeballing and estimating, which ones here do you think we can just eliminate straight away?
So again, we can eliminate the higher number, the higher end of the numbers out. So it's
Okay.
like Shibam did originally, which was ignore the ones with the massive amount of difference and the ones that don't show up as answers. We can do the same thing over here as well. But all of these coincidentally do show up as the answers. So one thing you can do here is take out the ones with either a large difference or a very high percentage. So the Master and Margarita has a very high percentage completion. So it's
Mm.
not worth actually even doing that. And again, the same thing for the over here, Life of Abacom, which has 27.1 and 8,000 different. So we know that is just obviously going to have less of a total number. 27.1% of 8,000 is going to be a lot more than 21.9% of 4,000 for fathers and sons. So we can actually take that one out too. The same thing for Master and Margarita, which leaves us with two choices. A Hero of Our Time, which is literally 11.9% of 7,000. And this is one where you potentially could be stuck on. And this is where you want to use a mixture of actually your calculator and your mental math skills as well. Now, you can get away with this mentally, Shivam. So you can round this up to 12, A Hero of Our Time, and
Yeah.
Fathers and Sons to 22. What I like to do with percentages is turn them into decimals rather than actually using a calculator. So you can change 11.9 to 12 and change that to 0.12. So 12% of something is just 0.12 or something. 0.12 times 7 would come out to be 0.084. And then same for 21.9. You can change that to 22. And as a percentage, that would be 22%, which would be 0.22 as a
So
decimal.
exactly. So on our calculator, we're just doing 0.22 times by 4, basically.
We can also do that mentally. We just know 22 times 4 is 88. We
Yeah.
also know 12 times 7 is 84. The lower value is actually 84, which is a Hero of Our Time. And if you do it mentally rather than even putting anything in the calculator, it saves you time bringing up the calculator, typing in the numbers. Well, you can just do 12 times 7, and you can also do 22 times 4.
Yeah. Okay, so what we've basically done here, just to kind of slow things down and really go for it step by step, is we've eliminated the Master and Margarita. We've got rid of A War and Peace, and we've got rid of Life of Aracum, just because we've eyeballed it and we can see that the percentages are a bit too large, or the difference is just too large. We've got rid of it. And what we seem to have come to is we're trying to now work out the difference between A Hero of Our Time and also Father and Sons. And that's what we've got here. We're at a 50-50 stage here. So what we can now do, Ashir, potentially is use our calculator, or if we're very, very good at mental maths, we could actually use some mental maths to actually work out the answer here. So we've just now gone down to Hero of Our Time and Father of Sons. And like you said, 7,000 times by 0.12 is 840. And for fathers, 4,000. So remember, it's 4,000 times by 0.22 is 880. So what's our answer here?
The Hero of Our Time. This is lower
Exactly.
value. And
Perfect.
just one thing to emphasize there, Shivam, since it's not actually asking us for exact values, you can actually even get rid of the 7,000, make it 7.
Yeah.
And again, same for the 8,000, just change that to, no, sorry, the 4,000, change that to 4, because you don't actually need to work out any values here. So 7 and 4 proportionally is the same.
Yeah.
So again, this becomes quite an easy question when you break it down. And you do get questions like these from time to time, and people asked about the frequency of them. Again, I wouldn't worry so much about that too much at this point, but they definitely do come up on the QR.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize with this question, this is a combination of estimating and also maybe using a bit of precision. But because Ashir's mental maths was very good, he didn't even need to use the calculator anyway, because he just used some mental maths and understood a bit about percentages. So again, probably Ashir, this is one of the most challenging questions that you can get in the UCAT in the quantitative reasoning section. So again, don't worry even if it took 2 minutes for some people, don't worry at all. This is a first time for most people. But what we wanted to actually show you guys is that it's actually easier than you first thought. And most of tackling this question issue is actually understanding what to do. Because to me, Ashir, when I first read this question, I had no idea what to do with these percentages. I was a bit confused about what that meant. But once we broke it down, we realized that actually we want to find the smallest percentages possible because we want to look at the smallest number of words. And then the rest of it, Ashir, again, estimating and elimination. If you can eliminate things early on, you're saving yourself a lot of time, aren't you?
Yeah. And that's a very good point. And, you know, it's so easy to miss out these things. For someone like me who actually scored the highest on the QR section, even now I will forget minor things like, you know, what Shivam pointed out at the beginning was look at the answer choices and just get rid of the ones that aren't there because you're never going to get them as an answer. And things like this is, you know, you will forget things throughout your preparation. You need to revisit them, do it again and again to the point where you will be watching out for things specifically like that when you hit the QR section of the exam.
Yeah, so I think that really summarizes everything. I just want to highlight a few points here from today. Estimating, the importance of estimating. The second point is eyeballing graphs, just understanding how, but actually you can just have a quick look at the graph and actually you don't need to look at the certain percentages or exact figures. You can really understand things just by eyeballing. And I think the biggest eyeballing technique that we went through today, Ashir, was what was it in terms of that kind of looking at the graphs there?
An average off the graph with the line and extrapolation is very important. You can do that for quite a lot of questions. You'd be surprised.
Perfect. And then finally, the final point that I want to mention is with estimating, remember the importance of over and underestimating. And again, people who struggled with the percentage concept on that last question, please don't worry too much. I'm just going to talk about it one more time. Again, I'm going to give some figures for it. So Ashir, if you had read say you read 1,000 words from the book and I read 5,000 words, okay? Sorry, but the book that you're reading is 1,000 words. The book that I'm reading is 5,000 words. If we read 100% of our relative books, what is the difference between the number of words that we've read?
That would be clearly the difference of the total, so 4,000.
Yeah, 4,000. So you read 5,000, I read 1,000. The difference is 4,000. So what if, Ashir, we only read 1% of the book? Then what would it be?
It'd be the exact same because not the exact same value, sorry, but the difference would be proportionally the exact same. So the difference would be 4. So 1% would be, sorry, I'm doing this wrong, 50 and 10, so 40. So again, what Shivam's trying to say here is essentially, even if you change the percentages, the difference will be proportionally the same. So 100% and 1% is technically 5,000, 1,000, difference of 4,000. A difference of when we talk about 1% is actually 50 and 10, which will be 40. And again, since you're changing 100% to 1%, you're actually changing the difference from 100% to 1% as well. So in terms of proportions, it's the same.
Exactly. So actually there, anyone who found the percentage bit a bit complicated, but the bit that I want to highlight there is that if we read 100% of our relative books, it would be 4,000 words. The difference would be 4,000. If we both read 1% of the book, Ashir would have read 1% of 5,000, which is 50, and I would have read 1% of 1,000, which is 10. So actually 50 take away 10 is 40. So actually the difference between the number of words that we read is 40. So that's why, again, I'm just going to clarify this, the percentage with that question, we wanted to pick the smallest percentage possible because as you can see, if we only read 1% of our big books there that we read, actually it was only 40 words, the difference. But if we read the entire book, it would have been 4,000 words, which is so much more. So hopefully everyone can kind of understand that. I know that was a bit complicated, that question, but the whole point of today is to understand about estimating and actually over and underestimating. And for you to start understanding with quantitative reasoning, don't be scared of estimating and start practicing these questions. I really, really thought that, I really hope that today was useful and everyone found it as useful as possible. I know that we've kind of gone through things quite quickly. Again, we'll be back next week for our next session. Again, please just give us some feedback on our Trustpilot. You know, just drop me a quick message now if you found it useful, for example. Thank you so much, Ashir, for joining us today. And yeah, I think we've really pointed out some really important points here with quantitative reasoning. That is estimating. Estimating is so important, and also eyeballing the graphs, extremely important. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the evening, and afternoon, and rest of the weekend. I hope you found this useful. and hopefully we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care now. Thank you, everyone. Bye, Shivam.
See you later.